He pursued me for 3 years, and only when I decided to stop it, he asked me not to leave. This story is not about love. It's about how difficult it is to allow yourself to be yourself. I used to think I was invisible, but he never stopped looking at me, even when all I wanted was to disappear. At Ridge Hill High, there were rules you didn't question. Football players ruled the halls. Quiet kids like me, we stayed out of the way, heads down, lockers shut fast. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a constant tension in your shoulders, waiting for the comment, the shove, the laugh that never included you. For me, that tension had a name: Jaden Hart, quarterback, legend, the guy everyone wanted to sit with or be seen near. But for some reason, he had a different use for me. Since sophomore year, he'd made me his target. I was the brainiac, the teacher's pet, the quiet freak. His words, not mine. And I got used to the sarcastic remarks, the random bumps in the hall, the knowing grins that made me feel like a joke in a language I didn't speak. I learned to survive. I timed my locker visits to avoid the team, ate lunch behind the science building, spoke only when I had to. That worked until it didn't. It was the Monday after midterms when everything shifted. I was stacking my books after chemistry when his shadow fell across my desk. I knew that silhouette, tall, restless, always moving like he owned every inch of space. "Hey," he said, not smug, not loud, just hesitant. I glanced up. Jaden never hesitated. "What?" I asked, bracing for the usual insult. He scratched the back of his neck. "You're good at this science stuff, right?" I blinked. Was this a setup? "I need help," he added. "Like tutoring or whatever. Coach says I'm benched if I fail again." I stared at him, unsure if I was supposed to laugh. "You're asking me to help you?" "I'm not begging," he muttered quickly. "Just saying, you do this. I stop messing with you." That caught me off guard. A truce? From him? I should have said no. Should have reminded him of every hallway shove, every name he called me. But I didn't, because there was something off in his voice. Not weakness, more like pressure, like this cost him more than he wanted to admit. "Fine," I said. "After school, library." He didn't thank me, just nodded once. "Don't make me regret it, nerd." That evening, I almost didn't show. My brain told me it was a mistake, but curiosity won. And maybe, though I wouldn't admit it, so did the need to be seen. He was late, of course. When he finally dropped into the chair beside me, his usual confidence felt dialed down. He didn't posture, just flipped open his notebook and waited. The first 30 minutes were painful. He got frustrated easily, muttered under his breath, doodled when I talked. But I pushed back, made him redo equations, asked questions he didn't expect. "You're bossy," he said at one point. "You're slow," I shot back. His grin flashed. Not cruel, just surprised. Like no one talked to him that way. But what shook me most wasn't his grin. It was how close he leaned when I explained things. How his arm brushed mine and didn't move. How his knee tapped against mine under the table and stayed there. I told myself it didn't mean anything. We were crammed into a small space. Proximity. Coincidence. But my body didn't believe me. By the time we wrapped up, something had shifted. He hadn't mocked me once. He hadn't even looked at his phone. As we stood to leave, he glanced at me. Not like I was a target, more like something else. "You're not as annoying as I thought," he said, "and you're not as dumb as you act." He laughed, not the loud, performative kind I heard in the hallways. This one was real, low, quiet. The next day, I expected things to go back to normal, but they didn't. Jaden didn't bump into me, didn't call out across the hallway. He just nodded, subtle, like a secret, a message I wasn't sure I wanted to decode. People noticed. His friends stared. One even asked him what was going on. He shrugged it off, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. That week we met again, then again. Our sessions became routine. He still rolled his eyes, still joked. But it was different now. He listened, tried, sometimes even asked questions without prompting, and I noticed everything. The way his voice softened when he didn't understand. The way he fidgeted with his pencil when he was frustrated. The way he didn't flinch when our arms touched. He was still the guy who made my life hell, but he wasn't just that anymore. And that was the dangerous part. Jaden had a way of filling space without trying. He didn't just walk down a hallway. He moved through it like everyone else should make room. And people did. That's who he was. But when we sat across from each other in the library, something changed. He didn't try to dominate the air between us. He leaned in. He listened. And I hated how much that affected me. 3 sessions in, I knew something was off. Not just the way he stopped calling me names in public. Not just the way he brushed against me on purpose when reaching for a pencil, but the way he lingered after our sessions, the way his gaze held a second longer than necessary, like he was waiting for something neither of us would say. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that it was just my brain misfiring, confusing kindness for something else. It had happened before. You get starved for attention, and even scraps feel like connection. But then came the Friday that broke my theory. He waited for me after practice. Not in the hallway, not by accident. Outside the gym, under the bleachers, where no one would see. "You walking home?" he asked casually. I blinked. "Since when do you care?" He shrugged. "Just thought, you shouldn't walk alone. It's late." I wanted to laugh. This was the guy who used to trip me outside this very gym. Now he was playing escort? But I nodded. We walked in silence at first. Leaves crunching under our sneakers, street lamps flickering overhead. He kept glancing sideways at me, like he had something to say but couldn't find the shape of it. "You ever think about after?" he asked suddenly. "After what?" "High school. What comes next?" "Yeah, every day." He smirked. "Let me guess, some fancy college, science scholarship, lab coat dreams." "Something like that." He went quiet again. Then, "I don't know what comes next for me." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say to that. We reached the corner where our paths split. He hesitated, hands in his pockets, then looked at me. "Thanks for not treating me like an idiot," he said, "even when I kinda am." I managed a small smile. "You're not." He stared at me for a moment, not smirking, not smug, just focused. "You make it hard to hate you, you know that." Then he turned and walked away. I stood there long after he was gone, heart pounding for reasons I didn't understand. I replayed his words over and over, looking for subtext that might not even be there. That weekend I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. That look in his eyes, the pause before he left. I told myself it was meaningless, that I was inventing stories where none existed, but I couldn't shake the feeling. On Monday, things got worse. Not with him, with them, his friends. They noticed. It started with a glance, a joke too loud near my locker, a shove that came out of nowhere in the cafeteria. At first, Jaden ignored it. Then he didn't. One of the guys, Brent, tall, always loud, made some comment about me being Jaden's homework wife. Everyone laughed, except Jaden. He didn't say anything, just stared at Brent until the guy looked away. But I felt it, the shift. They were watching now, closely. That afternoon, I waited in the library. He didn't show. I told myself he got busy. Football practice, coach's lecture, something reasonable. But then the next session, he was late. Then the next, he skipped completely. When he finally did show, his smile was gone. His eyes tired. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Just noise." He didn't explain, and I didn't ask. But the distance grew, not all at once, like threads snapping one by one. He stopped brushing against me, sat farther away, didn't stay to talk. I told myself this was what I wanted. Space, normalcy, no confusion. But it felt like losing something I never fully had. Then came the moment that ended whatever we were pretending not to be. Locker room, after swim practice. I was late getting out. Jaden walked in, alone, flushed from the field, shirt clinging to his back. He paused when he saw me, eyes flicking down, then back up. He looked like he wanted to say something, but instead he muttered, "Don't wait for me next time," and left. No explanation, no eye contact, just a wall slammed back into place. That night I couldn't breathe, not from heartbreak. We weren't anything, but from the weight of being pulled close, then pushed away, of being seen, then ignored, of wanting something that couldn't exist. And yet, I knew this wasn't over, because people like Jaden don't look at you like that unless something inside them is breaking too. I thought he'd pretend it never happened, that walking out of the locker room would reset everything, like a switch flipped back to normal. I was ready for it, or I told myself I was. But what I wasn't ready for was silence. Jaden didn't just pull away, he vanished. No texts, no sessions, no nods in the hallway. Even the small glances stopped. It was like I didn't exist again. And maybe I never had. For a few days, I convinced myself I'd imagined everything. The attention, the change, the hesitation in his voice, the space he made when we studied side by side. I told myself it was all projection, a fantasy built from loneliness and confusion. But it still hurt, because even if it wasn't real for him, it had become real for me. On Thursday, Coach handed out the exam results in chem. Jaden's paper sat untouched at the edge of his desk, name scrawled across the top. C, just enough to keep him off the probation. He didn't even look at me when he picked it up. I was done trying. That afternoon, I headed straight home. No library, no waiting. But halfway there, I heard my name. I turned and there he was, out of breath, like he'd run to catch up. I thought we were done, I said. He looked at me, jaw tight, like the words tasted wrong in his mouth. I'm sorry. For what? I snapped. For using me to pass? For letting your friends treat me like garbage? Or for pretending none of it mattered? I didn't pretend. Yes, you did. And now you're back. Why? Because you passed and don't need me anymore? He flinched, just for a second. Then he looked down. I didn't know what to do, he said quietly. Everything got too loud. I stared at him, searching his face for something honest, something not wrapped in ego or guilt. Why me? I asked. Out of everyone. Why pick me to push around? Why ask me for help? Why look at me like that? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a shaky breath. Because you don't pretend. You never have. Even when I was awful, you still saw through it. I didn't respond. My throat was too tight. I didn't hate you, he added. That's the problem. His voice cracked on the last word, and for a second I forgot how to stand still. I should have walked away, told him it was too late, that apologies don't erase years of damage. But instead I said, then stop running. He looked at me like I just dared him to jump off a cliff. Later that evening, he showed up at my house. No warning. Just rang the bell like he hadn't ignored me for a week straight. We sat in the backyard, far from anyone who could hear. He told me things I hadn't expected. That his dad pushed football because it was the only thing he ever did right. That being soft, even for a second, got punished at home. That sometimes, when the crowd cheered his name, he still felt alone. I didn't know who I was, he said, but when I was near you, it got worse, because part of me wanted to be that guy, the one who listens, who doesn't need to be in control all the time. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't even romance. It was fear, and the weight of years pretending to be someone else. I didn't say anything. I let the silence speak. Then he looked at me, and there was no wall left in his eyes. I don't know what this is, he said, but I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel it. It was too much and not enough all at once. So I said the only thing that felt true, then figure it out, but do it without hurting me again. He nodded, and for the first time since I'd met him, Jaden didn't look like the boy who had everything. He looked like someone trying to rebuild from the rubble he made. It didn't last long. The quiet, the understanding, the space we carved for honesty. For 2 weeks, Jaden kept his promise. No more vanishing, no more mixed signals. He showed up to our study sessions without being asked. He stopped playing the part everyone expected of him, at least around me. And in private, he wasn't the boy who used to knock my books out of my hands. He was someone else. Not perfect, not even close, but real. That was enough, until the world started watching. It started with a photo. Someone caught us outside the school library. Jaden was leaning too close, his arm resting on the back of my chair. We weren't touching, but it looked like we could have been. It looked like something. By Monday morning, it was everywhere. Airdropped across campus, posted on burner accounts. Group chats lit up with it. No caption needed, just the image, loud enough on its own. By third period, whispers followed me down every hallway. I kept my eyes forward. Jaden did the same, but he was unraveling. I saw it in how he flinched when someone laughed behind him, how he slammed his locker harder than usual, how he didn't speak during practice. His teammates noticed too. At lunch, I sat alone again. No more passing notes, no more shared glances. By the time the final bell rang, I felt the familiar weight settle on my chest, the one I thought I'd finally shaken off. After school, I waited, at the usual spot, but Jaden never came. Hours passed. I texted once, no reply. That night, someone slid a note into my locker. "Stay away from him. You're ruining everything." No name, just sharp black ink. The next day, Jaden finally found me, cornered me behind the bleachers where the cameras couldn't reach. "I didn't know they took that picture," he said, eyes wild. "I didn't think they'd care that much." I held up the note. "Someone cared enough." His jaw clenched. "I'll handle it." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to handle me. You don't get to disappear when things get hard and come back when you feel bad." He didn't speak, so I did. "You wanted to figure it out? Figure it out now. Out there, when people are watching. That's not fair. What isn't fair is being dragged into your storm and blamed for the thunder." His silence was answer enough. I walked away before I said something I'd regret, but I regretted walking too. That weekend, I avoided everything. My phone, school chats, even the swim team. I didn't want to explain, or defend, or be stared at like I was a walking scandal. Monday hit like a wall. Jaden was in school, but something had changed. His usual group was smaller now. Brent was missing. The energy around him was off. Less joking, more cautious glances. People were scared of him now, not because he'd done anything, but because he hadn't denied it. And that was enough to split the crowd in two. Some whispered behind his back. Others just watched. But he didn't flinch. Not anymore. At lunch, he walked across the cafeteria, straight toward me. I froze. He stood in front of my table. No audience, no smirk, just him. "I'm not going to hide," he said. My tray was shaking. "Okay," I said quietly. He sat down, across from me, in full view of everyone. The room didn't go silent, but it felt like it should have. He didn't touch me, didn't say anything else. He just ate lunch beside me, and that was louder than anything else he could have done. After that lunch, the silence changed. Not the kind that used to hum between us in study rooms or echo in locker rooms after practice. This one was loud, public. A silence that forced people to pick sides, even if no one asked them to. Some avoided us altogether. Some stared like we were contagious, and a few just laughed. Like if they laughed loud enough, they wouldn't have to think too hard. But Jaden didn't move. He kept showing up, sat with me at lunch, walked with me after school, didn't touch me, didn't say much. But he was there, and in a place like Ridge Hill, being there was everything. He never said the words. I didn't either. That wasn't what this was about anymore. This wasn't a confession. This was survival. Still, it didn't come without cost. He lost friends. Brent stopped talking to him entirely. Teammates mumbled things when they thought he couldn't hear. His name came up less in the morning announcements. The coach stopped nodding when he passed by. For the first time, Jaden wasn't the golden boy. He was just a boy. And in that, I saw something real, something better than perfect. But not everyone did. The school held a mandatory assembly 2 weeks later, officially about sportsmanship and student behavior. Unofficially, it was about us. They never said our names. They didn't have to. Principal made a speech about respect, but it was laced with warnings, subtle, slippery, like the problem wasn't how people reacted to us, but that we existed at all. Afterward, Jaden waited for me by the stairs. "I'm tired," he said. I nodded. "Me too." He looked like he wanted to say more but didn't, just shoved his hands in his pockets and stood there, quiet. That night he called. "I think I'm done." "With what?" "Everything that's not real." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. The next day, he walked into class with a folder in his hand and handed it to the teacher. Inside, a statement, typed, signed, clean and direct. In it, he said what he needed to say, that he'd hurt people, that he'd made choices from fear, that he wasn't proud of who he'd been, and wasn't ashamed of who he was becoming. He didn't name me, didn't tell anyone what to think. He just spoke for himself. It went viral, not outside the school, just inside, the way these things always do. But this time something was different. Some people still mocked. Of course they did, but others didn't. Teachers nodded at him in the hall. A few kids I'd never spoken to gave me small nods too, like they saw me now. Not as a rumor, but as a person. It didn't fix everything. Rumors still lived in corners. Whispers still followed us sometimes, but they stopped controlling us. We didn't become a couple. We didn't post photos or hold hands or write each other poems behind the gym. That wasn't the point. The point was that he stopped hiding, and I stopped apologizing for existing. The point was that someone who used to make me feel small gave me space instead, and I took it. By the time graduation came around, the noise had faded. New scandals had replaced ours. New seniors had taken the spotlight. The school moved on like it always does. But we didn't forget. Jaden didn't go far after high school. Stayed in town for a while. Took classes, worked a job, lived quietly. We stayed in touch. Sometimes we'd walk. No labels, no drama. Just two boys who used to be afraid of what the world might say. Now we just didn't care.